So, David, recently I was having a conversation with some of my leader peers, and they were talking about how often, as perioperative leaders, especially in a director role, we kind of get to that level and we end up pretty much staying there. People just kind of, you're doing an amazing job in an area where a lot of people don't understand it, and they believe that that's kind of where you should be. And there's very few roles that, are that VP and above in that area. What do you think some of the core competencies are that a perioperative nurse leader that has excellent skills has to be in a broader role, like a CNO role, like you're in now?
Yeah. Well, there are very few people in the hospital that know operations more than perioperative services. And so that is a skill set that is oftentimes the CNO or nursing leaders are not involved as much in operations. You have a chief operating officer that will do that, but I'm telling you, the perioperative services director or VP of periop is an expert in operations, logistics, supply chain, getting things from one place to another at the time that you need it. That's a skill set that's very different for nursing. In my role as chief nursing officer, I don't have to do those things. And so it's something that I think most periop services leaders don't capitalize on. Okay. They don't know all the things that they do on a day-to-day basis that are less about the actual care of patients, while they're certainly responsible for that, and more about the business of healthcare. And so that is a skill set that I think they undersell tremendously. The other skill set that is related to physician relationships. So over the course of my career, I have led, obviously, in perioperative services. I've led in ambulatory clinics and inpatient units. And the two places where you see physician presence attending, I work in academic healthcare, and so I'll use the term attending physician, but the attendings where they live, the operating room and the clinic. Right. And what that does, the nurse leaders who work in those spaces have developed very strong skill sets around physician engagement and physician relationships. That's not a skill set that you see as broadly in the inpatient setting, because the attending physicians are not as present all the time. And so it wasn't something that I realized as I was growing up in the operating room until I moved into a role where I had the inpatient units, and I was kind of like, where are the physicians? It is a space that the nurse owns. I mean, it really is most all about nursing on the inpatient units. And so when you want to engage the physicians, I have watched now many inpatient leaders, they just don't have that skill set, versus a nurse who comes from the operating room or procedural settings. They're very comfortable with physician engagement.
Wow, that really really hits home to when I think about the things that we actually really do on a day-to-day basis in these roles, and you really hit the nail on the head. And I think people just don't tell the story is in the way that makes the most sense. So how would you tell a leader that's in one of those roles in perioperative services, how would they best set themselves up if they are interested in being a CNO?
Well, the first thing is, and I have said this to several people that I work with, and I may have said it to you, I don't know, but I have reminded people, your career is your responsibility. If you think that someone else is taking care of that, that's your first mistake.
That's so good.
Right? And yes. So I've told people, if you're not thinking about what you want for your career, the truth is nobody is.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a sense that people don't want what's best for you or they don't care about what's happening with you. They're taking care of themselves.
Right.
And so this is one of those spaces where I think nurses sometimes are so passive, and that they're waiting for someone else to come and invite them.
Right.
And I would highly encourage a perioperative nursing leader to be thinking about, what is it that I would like to do?
Yes.
And then step back and say, what are the experiences that I might need in order to do that? And then start raising your hand and say, hey, I'll cover dialysis. I'll help with interventional radiology, or even talking with your CEO or chief nursing officer to say, I'm interested in expanding my skill set. When you have something come up that's outside of the OR and procedural spaces, I'd love to help with it.
Yes.
And I do think that that is a challenge for perioperative nursing leaders, because they are either they're either so preoccupied with what's happening in their role, because the truth is it's probably the hardest job in the hospital. Yes. And they're so preoccupied with it, they just don't pause to take the time to think about what those other things are that they could help with, or they're waiting for an invitation. And I think neither one of those are okay. You've got to pause and be in charge of what you're wanting for your career.
There are leaders that I've talked to in the past that all they're focused on is promotion. They don't raise their hand because they're passionate about something, or they really want to do something because it's a part of, who they are as a leader, but they do it with the understanding of thinking, oh, this is how I get promoted, or this is how what do you tell people that they want to do more and be raised into other positions, but how do you get there? What would you tell them to focus on?
Well, I think, and people don't always like to hear this, but I do think the first thing you have to do is to make sure that you're thriving where you're planted. And so sometimes people get antsy and they start getting distracted and looking at what they're wanting, and then the role that they're in starts to falter a little bit. You have to protect yourself from that, and ensure that you are focused on delivering what it is that for the role that you're in. I think that's probably the biggest vulnerability of leaders who are seeking something else. Right. They get distracted and then stop doing what they were hired to do. That is a fatal flaw, because at that point then you're characterized by what you're not getting done right. in the role that you're doing. And so you really have to protect yourself from that. I think the number one thing is to open yourself to talk to somebody and let them know. And that takes courage, because I think a lot of people are nervous to say to somebody, I'd like to do something else. Again, because they're waiting for an invitation, or they're wanting someone else to ask them, or they don't want the feedback about what they need to be working on. But I really think it's important that people find a mentor, find someone that will be honest with them right. about what kind of experiences they might need to get. And then it's always good experience to interview. Sometimes interview, even though you're not gonna get the job, but it would give you some kind of a feeling about what are those experiences that they're looking for. I think one of the difficulties and challenges of the operating room and perioperative services in general is that we are so isolated. And because of that, you sometimes forget what's necessary in other parts of the organization and what skill sets you have that are transferable. I realized in my transition to becoming a chief nursing officer, I was way more comfortable than I expected in the ICUs. And I think it's because I realized we're providing critical care to every patient in our ORs. All of the monitors, ECMO, all of those technologies, I was very comfortable with. And that surprised me. I expected a lot more of a learning curve with that than what I experienced. The areas where I wasn't quite as comfortable, I had to focus and spend a little bit more time. But I would highly encourage periop leaders to find a mentor and kind of ask them what they would think would be some good experiences to kind of stretch them. One of the best things that you can show an executive leader is that you're able to do something that is just outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
And we have, where I work, I have a pattern, I guess I would say now, because I've done it a couple of times, where I've asked someone to go lead in an area that was completely outside of their comfort zone from a clinical care standpoint. I didn't expect them to become a clinical expert, but I wanted to see, could they transfer those leadership skills to a different environment. If you're able to do that and demonstrate that, I believe you can lead anywhere. I pretty much think if you can lead in an OR, you can lead most anywhere. But most OR leaders will not, they don't communicate that as effectively.
That is really awesome that you said that. I've experienced where many people don't put leaders in other areas because they don't have the experience there. But I think to myself a lot, it's not necessarily me doing the clinical work. So if I was placed in a place like that, they want me to lead. And so it's all about your leadership and how you can learn enough, lead that team to excellence. And I think that's what it's really all about. When you get to that leadership level, you should be able to pivot and do many, many different things. And I think perioperative leaders can absolutely do that.